So nurses, and we have many listeners on our webinar today, but we're talking about the art of nursing. And people might start to think, well, what's this all about? You know, as a nurse, you will have said she's a bit off colour. You will have referenced a aesthetic comment, but Pantene colours have only been around about 50 years. Nurses have been around much longer than that. And we've known what a bit off colour looks like before anyone had even invented the range of colours that we're supposed to be looking for in the world as artists, as well as what we're supposed to be looking for in our observations. You could add in, they look awful. How many times have you said that without being able to actually have a concrete measure for how awful and what awful actually means? You're taking a leap from a sense that you're doing to a sensibility, making sense of this. And this is how we balance with the science of nursing, all of those biological observations we do with the art of nursing, this humanity and humility that we bring, the sense and sensibilities. Quick note on the three women who aren't in the room who have informed this kind of thinking. Nightingale, 1859. We have to put a bit of history in when we've actually got the museum and the nursing heritage team and the exhibition coming. She said, attending to one's own senses should tell a nurse how the patient is. So that real recognition of our senses is crucial. More recently, Patricia Benner, in her expertise on nursing practice, shows the sensing aspect of expertise. Here's some of her words about being a nurse with a patient. Around midnight, he started getting a bit more pale. I looked at the baby. He looked much worse than before, looked absolutely terrible. Then she goes on to explore how expertise happens. But these are the sensory aspects that we use that aren't necessarily written down. How awful is, I've never had to write or describe how awful in my obs charts. And more recently, a female reference point leading change. Bernie Brown in Dare to Lead. She says that we have to dare greatly. And as nurses, I think we need to do that. And she says, be vulnerable. Vulnerability is doing something with, and knowing that you're not controlling the outcome, and the arts help us do that. And this is what we're doing today. I am not in control of the outcome here. This is a webinar led by artists and led by people expert by experience. So our first artist is Daniel. He's going to be with us for about 8 minutes. And Daniel Regan is a visual artist and founding director at the Arts and Health Hub. His work brokers dialogues around topics such as mental health, grief, racism, belonging, and is often informed by his own lived experiences. Ordinarily, we were doing no images, no slides in our webinars, but this is about art and lived experience. And so we are going to have some slides, but they will be available afterwards if you're running, jogging, listening, shopping, working, doing anything that you can't get to a screen and you're just listening to us. So Daniel, over to you for your 8 minutes worth of space.
Great, thank you. I'll just wait for my slides to load up. Great, thank you. So greetings from my colourful South London studio. Thanks for having me here today. I am excited to talk about different strands of my practice in arts and health. And I speak really openly about my experiences, and I'm very happy to, but it makes me feel more comfortable if I switch my camera off as I am speaking, so that you are just listening to my voice whilst looking at the images. It means that my mind is less distracted and more at ease. So I discovered photography as a young person whilst experiencing mental health struggles, and my relationship to art making is intrinsically linked to my mental health. These two images are incredibly special to me because they were made during my first psychiatric hospitalization in 2004. The rough blankets and bedding still give me goosebumps when I look at them. They remind me that not all places of supposed care truly embody what it is to care for vulnerable people. One of my strongest memories of this stay takes me back to one evening when I was feeling particularly despondent. A mental health nurse, who I'll call Jay, sat at the end of my bed. Unlike other people at the hospital, he sat and listened. I could see that he was listening intently. He did not offer me solutions. He did not tell me what to do. He looked at me softly, witnessing my pain. Years later, I remembered his name and I sent him a message on Facebook, and he replied saying that he was so glad that I was still here on this earth. I will always remember him. Next slide, please. So much of my creative work has been about unraveling and making sense of the past to live softly in the present. In 2012, while studying for my photography masters, I was also undertaking 18 months of intensive outpatient treatment. The work that I created informed my personal therapy, and the therapy informed my photographic work. One of the first things that I did was to request my mental health medical records from Brighton and Hove, where I lived for 7 years, and had been under the alleged and sometimes genuine care of services. My response was to wallpaper my body with these records, a 10-hour process using liquid latex and supported by a trusted friend made in group therapy. This image is performative in its nature, and it grapples with my ideas at the time of my illness as a second skin, tearing away to see what is revealed underneath. Next slide, please. In 2022, I was commissioned by the Tavistock and Portman Mental Health Trust to create a permanent body of work exploring my experiences of racism and how it has affected my mental health. I come from a Black father and a white mother that dared to have an interracial relationship. My mother was told that she was a traitor to her race, and my father was told that he shouldn't be allowed to exist. They created me, a light-skinned, mixed-race man who apparently belongs everywhere and yet nowhere. I exist in this third space, at times unrooted, without foundations. In these images I created, I am fractured. I drew maps of fictional places where I hoped to belong. The vinyl wall on the back is a map of where I now live in Peckham in South London with my husband. He is white, we are queer, and no one cares. We move through the streets with ease. Next slide, please. I have a very strong participatory practice working with others, primarily focused on mental health. And for this exhibition called Our Future Likes, I worked with young people under section at Bethlehem Hospital, tasking them to produce images about what it means to be a young person in hospital. I started by sharing my own images with them, including the hospital beds, to let them know that I have been where they have been. It was a roller coaster project and I was along for the ride. 1 week, a young person may be totally engaged, the next too unwell to participate. Another week, they've vanished, moved to another ward or gone home. Staff and parents told us what we could and couldn't do. The project was littered with restrictions, the irony of creative freedom squashed for young people who already have so few rights. I felt very proud of what they produced and the risks that they took with me. Next slide, please. I'm currently working on a major project on the theme of belonging, working with Bethlehem Gallery and Queer Circle, which is a queer arts space in South London. I have a complicated relationship to belonging from multiple angles. Being mixed race, being the descendant of an adoptee, being a queer person, being estranged from all of my family, and being a disabled and neurodivergent person in a world that isn't designed for us. I'm currently Bethlehem Gallery's research artist in residence, and with funding and support from the gallery, I'm curating a public programme of workshops, online in-conversation events, and a symposium bringing together artists and professionals from different disciplines to explore belonging from a diverse range of perspectives. Home and migration, complex family histories, race and heritage, and much more. And all of this work is informing the work that I am making for a solo show at the gallery in spring 2026. And you can find out more about that project on my social media or on my website. Next slide, please. Another arm of my work is being the founder and one of the co-directors of the Arts and Health Hub. And this is a not-for-profit organisation that has been running for 10 years and whose sole purpose is to support artists that are exploring health and well-being in their practice. And we do that through peer-to-peer support sessions, professional development programmes, cultural events such as exhibitions and workshops, and training with organisations that want to work with these kinds of artists. It was initiated because after my MA, I felt isolated as an artist making this kind of work, and I couldn't find my tribe. We think deeply about how about how we embed care into our programs and the artists that we work with. We hold values of non-competition, reciprocity, and generosity. Next slide, please. Sometimes when an artist is working at the intersection of arts and health, it can feel like floating on an island alone, unsure of who to talk to or where to gain support to develop ideas. Every 2 months, we bring together artists to do just that. And so in our artist peer groups, which I've been facilitating for a decade now, 2 artists share an active idea, project, or challenge that they need support with, and we generously support them with focused feedback to push their idea forward. We offer up introductions to curators, we introduce artists to potential partner organisations, and we share resources and tips for self-care. When people discover these sessions and our organisation, they often email me saying, I finally found it. I have finally found my tribe. In this particular session, the artist was working on an olfactory piece for their project, collaborating with a perfumier to create the distinct hospital smell that she remembers from her childhood in Korea whilst living with leukemia. And here we are smelling a selection of scents and feeding back what they evoke for us to inform her research and developments. Next slide, please. And then finally, this 3-year project that we're running called the Support Hub is a blend of professional and affective support for artists working in the sector. And each year we run a programme of 4 support activities across London, Greater Manchester and nationally online. And artists are able to apply for a place in our peer-to-peer mental health groups or our peer-to-peer professional development groups. And for artists working in challenging environments such as hospitals, hospices, care homes, etc., we provide reflective supervision groups with an art therapist supervisor. And I recognise that my own route into this career as an artist has been really unconventional. It can be hard to get a foot in the door. So as part of this programme, we offer one-to-one mentoring opportunities for early career artists to be matched with a wide range of industry professionals, from disability arts advocates to curators and neurodivergent artists and more. I wouldn't change anything about my route into creativity and being an artist. Making photographs saved my life. It's taken me on an unconventional career journey that is simultaneously hard work, beautiful, painful, but a privilege. And I'm able to use my lived experience as a valuable form of knowledge that is entirely unique to me. So if you're interested to know more about my creative health practice or about the Arts and Health Hub, it's all pretty easy to find online or on social media. So thank you for having me today. And just to say, I am still here. Thanks.
And the synergy between how we work as nurses and in terms of support systems and hubs and supporting each other, as well as smells and the senses as well. So the sense and sensibility in art is very similar to some of the sense and making sense sensibilities in nursing. And that's why we create this third space between us as practitioners as well. So it's lovely to hear that synergy that you've spoken of. Daniel can't stay the whole programme, but connections on the website will be there to the hub and his work. So I'm going to say thank you. It's again an honour to hear from you and see your images. They resonate with me absolutely as a mental health nurse. So I'm going to move on to Jolie now, who's sitting with me. Jolie Goodman. Jolie is an artist who has worked from a survivor perspective in mental health for over 2 decades. As an artist, she identifies as a painter, making work in series using both physical and digital medium, often portraits telling stories. She has worked as interim chief executive at Lambeth and Southwark Mind and programs manager for empowerment and later life of the Mental Health Foundation. In the autumn 2024, Jolie began working with the Foundation of Nursing Studies as one of our joint lived experience co-production leaders, and she continues to work as a freelance artist, drawing at conferences, capturing the content of focus groups, and making animated films. Jolie's artwork has been exhibited at the Royal Academy and is archived in the Wellcome Connection. Jolie's sitting next to me, and I'm going to ask Jolie questions as we go, and Jolie has longer than Daniel, sorry Daniel, to speak. So Jolie, hello. Give us an overview of your artistic practice.
Okay, I just want to start by thanking Daniel, actually, because a lot of what you said really, really resonated with me. And also to thank everybody here for giving me this opportunity to talk about my work. It's quite rare to have a chance to look back at what I have done, what I'm actually doing, and how this work and being an artist will inform what I do at FONS. So, as Marion's already said, as an artist, I do make work in series, and my current practice is working both digitally, so which is really about drawing digitally, and physically making things and painting. So I make art about issues I care about deeply, and health is one of those issues, and that's an underlying theme in a lot of my work. I thought I'd start this talk today by putting up a portrait which was made in 2020. This is a man called Faye. He was a very, very dear colleague at the Mental Health Foundation. He worked in the finance department. He was very quiet, but he had a lovely manner, and he would talk to everybody. And I think something about him when he was very cohesive in the office. Well, really sadly, he died very early on in the COVID pandemic, and consequently, I made a portrait from an image from a Teams meeting. And I think sometimes it's something about using art, you know, Marion said, to see things differently, but also as a way to tell stories, but also to remember people so people are not forgotten. And you know, I was very moved by Faye as a person. He made a great difference to all of us in the office. Next slide. So in terms of series, this is a digital drawing rather than a painting. I guess I am slightly obsessive. So when Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, I decided the way that I was going to look after myself and manage my mental health was to make a daily drawing. Little did I know how the years would unfold. So I started in December 2019. Anyhow, so there are many images, quite a lot about health, because obviously there was much about health in the news. But here I am having my first COVID vaccine. And I've actually made images that capture the other vaccines as they became less of an issue.
Tell us about the artwork that you made close to using psychiatric services.
Okay. I think it's really interesting to those pictures that Daniel showed of the blankets, you know, the very evocative time spent on an inpatient ward. And I was very keen, I made quite a lot of artwork on that ward. I was very keen to be seen as an artist. And there was something about trying to have a voice where I felt very powerless. So as the years have passed, I guess I've been able to think differently about my lived experience, and rather than seeing it as a burden and something to be ashamed of, it's actually begun to be something of an asset. I've had very interesting work experiences because of it. I guess I was interested in sort of, I was on an acute mixed ward at the Maudsley Hospital. It's a long time ago now. So I was there when Lady died, which is a very sort of pivotal moment in history and also quite surreal in itself. After using services, I was funded by them. It had a different name, but the Maudsleys, to make a series of portraits, which hung in the boardroom for about a decade until they upgraded the boardroom. It was replaced with wood paneling, so they didn't know there was no room for these portraits anymore. But you know, there was something about these are 30 portraits of 15 people that I encountered. When I took on this mantle, I became a psychiatric service user. So there were 5 fellow service users, 5 people involved in my care, and 5 people on the trust board. Should I have the next slide as well? And this is somebody called Sue Glazier, I think she was a community liaison. She was very helpful to me. She and I actually went through my notes at one point. But you see, she's kind of pointing to this gentleman with the white hair who is actually asleep. And of course, he was a chief executive called Eric Byers. He did commission the artwork, but we had quite a big private view, which this photo was taken at. And he said at the private view, well, Jolie made these paintings as a thank you to the Maudsley. And so there was a real sense of like discord. And I suppose what I really retrospectively feel about my experience is that I was very much done to and not with.
Right.
Next slide. This is a painting that now is part of the Welcome collection. but I think it's really about my perspective as a service user. There was a lot of stuff happening around community treatment orders and a lot of talk about being forcibly injected on your kitchen table. So this was my way of kind of exploring how that made me feel. And for me, again, it's sometimes you can make paintings that can really express some of your uncertainty and fear in the future, and whether I would be able to maintain good mental health. I think a lot of my campaigning, the work that I've done since, has been to try and improve things in the system, so that if I ever need to go back, I would have a very different experience from the one that I had at that time.
So what about the pieces you have made about health?
Okay, so I put this up. I don't know if you can see it says Royal College of Nurses at the very top, and I did a lot of stuff. I was really interested in women's mental health. I did a lot of campaigning. I was a co-founder of a group of women who came together through the Maudsley services called the Campaign for Women Only Psychiatric Wards, and I was also sort of began volunteering and then working at Southwark Mind, and we had a huge conference about women's mental health, and then this was followed up by another conference, which was a bit later, about 2008, and the conference was called Resilience, Identity and Staying Well, and everybody who came brought an object or something with them, and they were photographed, something that they felt supported their mental health and well-being, and the drawings were made from those images. They are quite dated, but I still feel there's a real relevance to those images, and what's something, communication, phone, family, self-care. They're kind of all reflected in there. But there was a sense that it was quite powerful. There was a real emphasis on women's mental health, and there was a national board, and this was about these images were used to inform the Informed Gender Practice Guidance, which was a really big publication at that time. Sadly, I think there's a bit less discussion about gendered health, and things have definitely changed. But I think the campaigning at that time, certainly in South London, and as I'm finding from my work at FONS, wards are more segregated than they used to be, which works well for some people, and of course less well for others.
So what about making art with other people?
So the art that I've made with others, I think I need to change the slide. Thanks. This is a bit of work that I made, and it was a big project, which was Mental Health Foundation. But it was it's very practical, looking at people's experience. People have mental health issues, experiences of public transport, and this image kind of actually summarises more of the stresses for people, but also people who are neurodiverse, how to cope on public transport, how to manage a sensory overload, and also sometimes just the overload. I was commuting this morning, which I don't often do, and in fact having quite a lot of bags suddenly on a train, and actually the feeling of them all being slightly out of control. But this project worked with people with dementia, people with young mothers, and people with ongoing mental health issues, and a lot of data was generated. I think there's been a lot of stuff around mental health. There's a lot of issues around disability on public transport, but it's a really, how we leave our home safely and how we move through the world is really important to one's mental health and well-being. Next slide. Okay, this is. I wanted to put something about drawing live at conferences. This is from a social work education program. I just think it's very particular. I mean, I feel quite bruised this week by the rhetoric that's coming from America. But I also think this social work education, there was a real sense of acknowledgement of the past. People were talking about white supremacy. People were talking about being silenced as Black social workers, and I felt it was quite something to have a chance to be able to capture those images. Okay, so this is Daniel talked very properly about participatory work. So I seem to have got into making quite a lot of animations. This is the drawing that somebody made. We made an animation about looking up for men really who were living in asylum hotels last year, about how to look after your mental health in an asylum hotel, which feels like a contradiction in terms really. But it was so powerful. People made drawings about home. about where they come from. And then this is an image that somebody made about the Hilton Hotel outside Reading. And it was a very interesting world in there. I was surprised to find myself in this world. And one of the things, it was called the Belonging Project. There were no plates, nobody ate off plates. And I think something about health, well-being and food is so important going, for us all to keep in mind. Sometimes health is quite the simple things, but the things, and I know from the Ward Managers Programme, the continuing issue of food in inpatient mental health wards, it hasn't, it's a lot of years later since I used services, but it's complicated. It's so hard to change. Okay, this is something I'm working on at the moment. I've really enjoyed being part of a project that's about homelessness and dual diagnosis, but particularly about homelessness and diabetes, working with Pathways Inclusion. And again, funding, this is a project that will be, the initial project I was worked on about homelessness and diabetes has some amazing e-learning resources that are so powerful that they're free to access. So I'm drawing an animation that will direct people to these resources. This came from the art workshop with people with lived experience, but it actually will be called, I was actually working on this yesterday, Respect Me and My Diabetes. Another slide, because I was able, in terms of storytelling, really met Kelly, who has had such a complicated time with her diabetes and homelessness and housing. But this is about so there's some of that's captured, but this is very much about what has helped you to understand diabetes and kind of putting that across for people. It visually can be very powerful, can stay with people in a different way from just perhaps reading something about it. But one of the things about Respect Me and My Diabetes being spoken to on a level that works for me so it's about language and communication, which I think is fundamental for people receiving care in the health services, and something I think something that if you're caring for people, you need to be constantly reviewing that and checking in that you think you're getting that right, and if you're not, acknowledging that, because it's not always possible. Okay, so I'm going to move it along now to the work that I do for the Foundation of Nursing Studies. Here I am in this very building, and I was drawing at the FONS Away Day, and I'm capturing themes about how people reflected on ways of looking back and looking forward. So I work at FONS as one of the 2 lived experience co-production leads. So I think in some ways FONS is really looking forward with these roles. I find it really helpful to think about co-production. And if I look back to the social model of disabilities, nothing about us without us. And for people thinking about co-production, a really good, simple question is, am I doing with or am I doing to? So the co-production roles at the Foundation are funded by NHS England. And I have the last slide for this. The Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Inpatient Quality Transformation Programme is a really bold new model for the future of inpatient healthcare settings. So in the middle, we've got it's probably quite hard for you to see, but there's an image drawn by the artist Leanne Walker, and she's also somebody with lived experience, kind of illustrating all of the culture of care standards. So FONS is delivering a leadership programme for ward managers. This is really quite something for me, somebody who's used services, albeit quite a while ago, but I've come back on this programme, drawing on some of my experiences, but also I'm teaching on this programme. So we're co-producing the content of the workshop sessions. There'll be 7 sessions, and delivering and co-facilitating the whole programme as time goes on. And FONS is hoping to reach over 180 different ward managers throughout England. So practically, as an artist with lived experience, I kind of like to think of myself who is somebody who works creatively. So I ask people to draw a lot, and I ask people, even if I try to make people draw, even if they really hate drawing, they're really uncomfortable with it, there are ways for people to kind of move with the materials and to lose that sense of judgment and preciousness about the artwork they produce. And also, as I said, I also, as a person, capture themes and challenges. And I'm quite interested, I'm just starting this month with another organisation organisation, but also with FONS, to think about using small zines as a way to evaluate projects. So you make a zine and you tell a story in about 7 or 8 images. But I'm also at FONS, so I'm learning a great deal. I'm learning about how they use education. It's really powerful. It's active. It's not passive, which sometimes the word being trained, I still say the word trained too much, but I'm trying to get it out of my vocabulary. Trained is something that can really feel and key back into that you're being done to rather than with. The work that FONS does with the ward managers is really personal. They ask to bring themselves and their understanding of themselves as leaders into the workshops, and also to think about how they want to develop as leaders in the future and how they can role model that leadership. Creativity is very much part of this process at FONS. It is most simple. It's used to help generate knowledge and understanding that can be used to inform action. And the thing that I think is particularly co-productive about this is that those creating the knowledge get to decide what is the useful knowledge to them, what they're going to take forward, how they're going to work, how they're going to think about co-production on the really complicated environment of an acute ward. There's lots of ways creativity is used, at FONS. It means lots of different things. It might mean painting, drawing, collage, photography, visualization, movement. We've had a dance company come into these projects around learning disabilities, drama, dance, and even walking in nature. And I was really struck by Daniel thinking about the knowledge which is unique to him. And I guess actually I really relate to that. I feel I have quite, my creativity comes from knowledge that is unique to me. And I think we have a real opportunity as lived experience work increases. We can, myself and my colleague Wendy, we have very contrasting lived experience, but we can role model well-being, not only for the ward managers, but within the Foundation of Nursing Studies as well.
Thank you. This is a taster webinar. We hope we'll be doing podcasts where we can have more of exchange and co-production. And by working with the RCN and the exhibition that's coming, and that sort of books and all the kind of stuff that will come out of this, you will get more. So I apologise for now, just moving on to Janet and Dominic, but thank you from FONS as a trustee there for your contribution, for a nurse for your contribution, and as a human being for being part of this programme as well. And you see, we're perfectly coordinated as well as artists. So, and like I say, this is a quick fire. So we're going to now go to Janet and Dominic for the final piece. Janet and Dominic, I work with Paintings for Hospitals. They're dear colleagues of mine, and both are experts in their field. So I'm going to give you their biop. Janet Bates is an experienced art in healthcare professional who has worked for Paintings in Hospitals for 10 years. She also works as a freelance artist practitioner, delivering creative workshops in the community, and has her own studio of practice. Dominic Harbour is an accomplished creative health professional, educator, and artist with over 25 years of experience in the field, working with the NHS, the Arts Council, Health Lottery Fund, and the Church of England. And this team only have 8 minutes between them, but are going to give you a taster of the work that they're involved in directly with service users and the difference they make. Over to the team.
Okay. Right, if you want to just hold on that one slide, I'm going to do a quick overview of who we are and what we do, and then I'm going to hand over to Dominic, who's going to kind of do a bit of a deep dive into a couple of things which hopefully will highlight to everyone the sort of work that we do. But we are a healthcare, a creative health organisation. We've been going since 1959. We work with healthcare sites from hospices, mental health, sites, GPs, care homes, hospices, and at the centre of everything we do is the artwork collection which we hold. So we have our own artwork collection which has been curated for healthcare of over 3,000 artworks. And we work with sites to install those artworks into the sites to obviously improve clinical environments and support people's mental and physical well-being. And that is patients, staff, visitors, carers. And I think the key of what we do, which is the most important thing, is the engagement aspect. So we work in partnership with patients and staff through what we have as a co-curation process. So I'm going to give you a quick example where we've just been doing some work with a chemotherapy unit in King's College to install new artworks into a unit where people are sat having treatment in the day unit. And we ran an engagement where we worked with the Macmillan support volunteers to show people the artworks, to get people's response to those artworks, to talk about art, and then ultimately arrive at a collection of artworks which will go into the centre. We also work a lot doing creative partnerships. So we do creative activities. And again, at the basis of all of those is our artwork. So we were always using the artwork when we're working with service users and staffs as a response to the artwork. So whatever creative activity that we do, it is in response to the artworks in our collection. I'm going to hand over to Dominic quickly because I'm aware we've only got our 8 minutes, just so that he can give you a few examples of how we work with lived experience.
Thank you, Janet. I'll jump into this slide. So I'm going to show you some examples of projects that we've done. We work very closely with service leads, with nurses, with psychotherapists, art psychotherapists, and nurses to involve them, as Janet said, in as much of this process, the curatorial process as possible, and to really step into that creative health space where everybody can be creative together. So, you know, it is a very collaborative journey. This particular example was based around an artwork we have in the collection by Royal Society of Sculptors, artist Jill Rock, called Story Stick. And this was based around, this was at day hospice in Herefordshire. And based around creating individual sticks, painted sticks, which came together to make a complete collaborative sculpture. But the process really was guided by our own stories about trees, and trees as a sense of place. We were considering family trees. We were talking about trees as symbols in art, and also trees that we had relationships with, whether it was people we'd met at trees or trees in our lives or where we'd been working. So that very much was the theme. We'll just sort of go to the next slide, please. Not only making art, but talking about art. You know, this is an artwork called Wish You Were Here by David Mitchie. It's a little activity that we do about storytelling. It's a fantastic image, and one that just by looking at a painting and starting to talk about it and inventing our own stories around it, we start to open up and start to talk about the way that we feel about a particular healthcare environment or any particular circumstances at that moment. Next slide, please. A couple of other examples here of the same process. Next slide, please. And again, looking at staff and staff experiences. Next slide, please. This was a photograph taken at a befriending workshop that we did with Sue Ryder Hospice Care, where we were really working with the cohort of befrienders to introduce to them some very simple art discussions and art games with a view to helping them in their work, basically their counselling work and their befriending work. It was a very, very interesting project, and what we found was that safe space of being creative together started to open up really important questions that weren't being discussed for people who had had a very recent terminal diagnosis. So, a very interesting project. Next slide, please. That's another activities slide. Next one, please. So just wanted to mention really lastly that we're in the process of re-evaluating and reappraising the collection, prioritising the lived experience of our artists. And I did want to give you a couple of examples where individual stories were a vital point of connection for patients and staff during this co-production process. This artist, Nerys Johnson, really good example, interesting example. Nerys was a curator and keeper of fine arts at the Lang Art Gallery in Newcastle. She studied painting and art history at King's College, Durham University. She developed this very notable practice. If the little gallery isn't over the artworks that are on the right-hand side, she painted very vibrant, strong images of flowers all through her career. But what I haven't really mentioned is that she spent very early childhood in hospital with complications from rheumatoid arthritis, which was a lifelong condition. And it obviously became progressively more chronic for her throughout a very successful career. But her career as a painter was central to that. It limited what she was able and how she was able to work. Her canvases became smaller and smaller, reduced to accommodate her sort of reduced range of motion. A year before she died in the year 2000, she said, "I'm appalled when people see my painting as a hobby and comment on how relaxing it must be. If only they knew it takes every ounce of energy I have, every atom of concentration for me to paint a painting." She was painting until the last few weeks before she died, when friends would bring the flowers from her garden inside for her to draw, and that is one of her final paintings you can see on the left there. Next slide, please. Ed Dukovitz, another artist in the collection, born in 1961, very important artist at the moment for us, celebrated visual artist, largely self-taught, inspired by Alexander Calder and Henri Matisse. Between the 80s and 90s, he produced many wall paintings and murals for Tower Hamlets and worked with many city schools. He had two really successful solo shows in London, exhibited in Paris, Cologne, Stockholm, San Francisco. And though he remained relatively unknown, he was regarded as a very serious artist, producing important expressionistic modern paintings. He battled with multiple sclerosis, which was diagnosed at the age of 21. And by the time he was 40, he was no longer able to exhibit. During the last 6 months of his life, when he was unable to use his hands at all, he contemplated suicide quite publicly. He died in December 2007. And in his obituary, art collector Michael Historic said, "If there are echoes of Alexander Calder and Matisse in his use of bright colour and abstract form, it's also in their playfulness and joy. For sure, no one who has experienced so much pain as he also expressed as much fun and the pleasure of simply being alive, or for that matter, giving so much colour to those around him." And the final example, a current artist we're working with, Emma Douglas. And Emma graduated from the Royal College of Art in 1983, and following a short successful period of exhibitions and commissions, she withdrew from her own practice to start a family with 3 children. She returned to painting and drawing and making photographs in 2010. Her work's largely autobiographical and explores memories and moments from the past, particularly in relation to her son Cato, who died in 2010 at the age of 21. He'd been born needing lifelong care following meningitis as a baby and received treatment at the Royal National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery. In her artwork, which is on the left, the section behind Emma, she uses specific blocks of colour to create a linear diary, which with each rectangle corresponding to a specific place or event special to her son. It presents reflections, a literal day-to-day diary of her life with Cato, as not only demonstrating the tragedy of a life cut short, but also the beauty of unique events as individual cherished moments. Her work connects colour with emotion in a very visceral way. In our recent project, we've worked with Emma and staff from the Royal National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery, where Cato was catered for, and they're the artworks you can see on the right, where staff were working with Emma to create their own 2-week diary reflecting on the positive and negative experiences of their nursing on site, producing an image of how a week was, and then reflecting on how a week could have been, using the same approach and connecting with Emma's own story, making their own colour reflective diaries. So that exhibition remains in place at the hospital. So they're just some examples, thank you for the slides, some examples of the way that we try and reappraise the collection and use that with the co-curatorial process, embracing lived experience and sharing that with the staff and the service users that we're working with to select exhibitions and create artworks for projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dominic and Janet. And I've been working with Dominic and Janet in my work with paintings in hospitals for the past 7 years now, and have seen the amazing impact of engaging and creating art, but also the impact of using the art that we have on walls. And Foundation for Nursing Studies have one of the paintings in hospitals paintings called Zoe Take a Break. That was a piece of art that's been used in much of our teaching. Thank you. Like I say, this is a quick fire taster session through everyone. And I hope that if, as listening, you've gained some ideas, or you will be able to follow those up. We will provide the contact details for everybody in our last slide. I'm just going to put the nurse nerd bit on now in our final 6 minutes. As you've looked at these pictures or heard some of these stories, you've had a surge of cholesterol and serotonin. There'll be other surges going on as well, but there'll be moments of reflection that are happening there that you haven't necessarily processed yet. But physiologically, when we look at art, we actually get these chemicals happening. They bring happiness, they bring reflection and different physiological anxiety or connection. And it's that connection bit that's the other side, as well as the biology. We bring that sociological bit. There will be moments that you had here where they really match to your experience. I really want to colour in my calendar, not in a highlights way of a pink and, you know, black dots and pink highlighter, do not forget, but the sensibilities that come with my calendar in terms of my work with people as well. We've engaged in multiple ways of thinking and seeing, and that wiseness in nursing has come to the fore, in hearing the multiple perspectives, but also starting to understand that you can have two thoughts about one experience always, and you will have that and even more, and engaging our sensibilities. I've been a nurse, like I say, and there are nurses around the table, and we've had this push through life. Brené Brown has brought this to the fore, that professionalism often signals discretion, us keeping ourselves quiet and inside, rather than confession. And the arts can help us with reflection and be more confessional and be connected to the reality of our moral distress or the challenges that go on. It can be that third voice. So we keep talking about a third element here, rather than having to write it down or one of those reflective logs that you really don't want anyone to see. Art can help you express this in a different way. It's a self-disclosure, a personal response that's for you, but is cathartic as well. So on that note, I'm going to just tell you what's coming next. because our next webinar will have a slightly different stance. We are going to have the people who are working in policy and people who are working in education. Now, if you've just had a cortisol or serotonin response to that, I want you to tell you that these are the National Centre for Creative Health Associates. They are the artists and the clinicians working at grassroots level who are making stuff happen aligned to the health system, local authorities, integrated care boards. There are 10 in the country, and we are going to hear about some of their work and help you connect with that. We've got artist Andy Farr, who is also an academic, whose exhibition and academic input in the Midlands will help you see how we branch into universities. And we'll have the nurse educators who are putting creative health into the curriculum, how and why, and examples of how you can do it as well. So this whole art of nursing movement is about bringing the ideas as well as the ideology that there's a sense and sensibility in nursing that artificial intelligence can't do. The date for the next webinar is, level of detail,
13th of March.
The 13th of March. We'll advertise it on the LCN and the Art of Nursing website. And then in June, we will have another one. If you have a story or an experience you want to tell, get in touch with me, because this is about co-creating the art of nursing. And the exhibition in June through Katie will have some of the artifacts for art as well as the stories. And then there'll be the Harnessing the Arts book. And eventually we will create a wise profession, again, that actually recognises the essence of nursing beyond the notes of nursing that can be done virtually or vicariously, but actually are the ones that are missing when a patient says that wasn't just right. This is the bit that we don't want to lose. On that note then, please, the notes and the contact details are up on the site here. Daniel, Jolie, Dominic, Janet, I'm Marion Lynch. Email me if you have an idea, and if there's something that you want to link into the exhibition, or please email Sarah. I also now are giving you the 2 minutes needed to take a minute to do the survey. It's nothing like having to do forced reflection or forced surveys, but look, click on it, because this is an unfunded programme. We're doing this because I really can't let nursing become artificial nursing. There is no funding here, but in order to prove the impact of these webinars, we need to show that they're worth it. All our people here are giving their time for free. They work in organisations but that are supporting their time, but we don't have an art of nursing budget. We just have an art of nursing movement. So please give us feedback and any ideas of what you would like in the webinars that are coming. And on that note, there are 19 chat points, but I'm not going to chat, because if you say you want podcasts, we'll do podcasts. If you say you don't want to hear from us, we'll just use some artificial intelligence and give you some pictures made by non-sentient beings. And do your observations from afar. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to close the webinar now. Thank you to all our artists and our contributors, and I hope to see you in March. Get in touch if you need to speak with any of us, and go forth and be artful nurses. Thank you. Goodbye.